why don't you tell us a little bit about why you decided to seek this seat? Obviously, there's been a lot of national attention about the choice, but let's just hear it from you.
Yeah, well, thank you all for making time. These two newspapers mean a lot to me. I grew up reading The Statesman. It was delivered to our house every weekend, and I remember sitting around the family table for breakfast, and The Statesman was out, and all the sections were being grabbed, and it's really how I learned about politics and the world, and so it means a lot to be with The Statesman. And then y'all know that I was a public school teacher in San Antonio, and so San Antonio has been like my second home, and so it's really wonderful to be here with all of you, and I really appreciate the work y'all do. I stepped up to run for the U.S. Senate because I really believe that all 30 million Texans need a senator who's going to represent us and not represent billionaire mega donors. I said on the very first day of my campaign that the real fight in this country is not left versus right, it's top versus bottom. And in fact, this past week, I rolled out my comprehensive anti-corruption agenda, which I hope we can dig into in this conversation. But I really do think we need an experienced fighter who can go to Washington, stand up to this broken, corrupt political system, and take power back for working people in Texas and across the country. That's the work that I've done at the state level in the legislature, and it's the work I want to do as the next U.S. Senator from Texas.
Chief, can you refresh me, how long, how many terms have you served in the state leg?
I'm in my fourth term. So I was elected in 2018. Y'all may remember that I flipped a Trump district to get elected in Williamson County. Again, a county that hadn't voted for a Democrat for president since Jimmy Carter. And it was a district within the current boundaries that Democrats hadn't won in decades. And so I remember being told back then that the race was unwinnable. I was told flipping a Trump district was impossible. And I was also told I was too young, didn't have the money or the political connections to win. But my neighbors and I, we ran an aggressive, authentic, unorthodox campaign that brought people together. And on election night, we flipped that district with 51% of the vote.
And now you're being told some of the same things, I would say, right?
I'm the underdog once again. It's a position I enjoy being in. When you're the underdog, people discount you, they underestimate you, and I think we've built a campaign along with hundreds of thousands of others that is going to shock people on election night, I believe.
When you say it struck people, like obviously you're talking about the primary right now, right? Or are you talking about both? Or I guess I don't know.
I would say we're the underdog in both the primary and the general.
Okay. You said something interesting. You said it's the division in this country is not right versus left. It's if I'm paraphrasing here, it's top versus bottom.
That's right.
Explain to us a little bit more of what you mean by that. But it doesn't it also seem like there is a pretty harsh division right now between right and left? Like there are some fundamental things that the parties don't agree on too. So tell us more, but I also want to understand, because it does seem like we are divided that way also.
So, there's always going to be a natural debate between those who are a little more conservative. They want to preserve what we have, our institutions, our traditions, and there's going to be folks who want to push us forward, who are a little more progressive, who want to change things, and that's a debate that's been around for a long time, and that's okay and healthy and productive, and we all kind of fall down differently depending on the issue on different sides of that conversation. But I think the point I would make is that the billionaires who run our government, who run our media, who run our economy, they want us looking left and right at each other instead of looking up at them. They want us focused on how we're different, whether it's ideologically, racially, religiously, instead of focused on how we're the same. Because once we're focused on how we're the same, then we realize that those folks at the top are closing all of our public schools. They are gutting all of our healthcare. They are raising taxes on all of us while they cut taxes for themselves. And so to me, that's the real fight. I don't mean to say there's not a left versus right conversation. There always has been. But the reason things are so divided in this country, the reason it's so polarized is because those billionaires use their cable news networks, use their social media algorithms, use the politicians that they own who are fighting on our screens to exacerbate those differences for their own benefit.
You know, so you kind of touched on that. So let me pick up from where you were talking about, where do you see the proper role of Congress, Senate and House, in the U.S. Congress, in dealing with AI? There's an executive order regarding that kind of cuts states' ability to do anything about it. So, what should be the federal government's role in regulating AI and the dangers of it versus the benefits of it?
Yeah, I think this is yet another proof point for the argument I just made about the divide being top versus bottom. If you think about the scope and the scale of this innovation of AI, I think the only equivalence, the only parallels would be in the 20th century, things like the Manhattan Project, the development of nuclear weapons, and the space race. But those innovations in the 20th century were done in large part by the public sector, by all of us together as a country, as a community. This is the first time we've seen this kind of innovation, at least at this scale, done exclusively in private hands, in the hands of a few billionaires and for-profit corporations. And so I'm deeply worried that these technologies are being developed not to help people, but to hurt people, particularly workers, particularly young children. And so I would want to see our federal government, particularly our United States Senate, take a very active role in shaping how these technologies are developed and how they are used. I would want to see a robust regulatory framework developed by our federal government, something we don't have right now. And you just alluded to the fact that we've seen the current administration roll back regulations on AI. This is going to fundamentally change how we do business, how we raise our families, how we interact with each other. And I heard an estimate from an AI entrepreneur that they think 50% of white collar jobs are going to be wiped out by the end of next year. And now, so I don't know if that's alarmist or not, but I do know that there are transformational changes coming because of AI, and our government is nowhere to be seen. And that should be disturbing to all of us, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum or regardless of where you are on the AI debate, whether you think it's going to be, utopia or dystopia or something in between. The fact that we as a country don't have a say in how these technologies are being developed and how they're being employed should be alarming to all of us.
You had mentioned earlier about the anti-corruption platform that you want to talk about, and I want to hear more of the details of that, but I also want to hear like the political aspect of it, because it seems like there's also a chicken egg problem here. How do you get those types of measures approved when the very people who are benefiting from our current system and the brokenness of our politics are the ones who would need to pass these kinds of measures?
Yeah, I actually think the second question you asked is maybe the most important, but let me answer the first one first. So the anti-corruption agenda that I've rolled out includes a few things. One, it focuses on getting big money out of our politics, so banning corporate PACs, banning super PACs, and banning members of Congress from trading stocks to enrich themselves while they're in office. In fact, the first day on the job as the next U.S. Senator from Texas, I will sign on to the bill that would ban congressional stock trading. But it's not just focused on corruption that involves money. I feel like oftentimes we think corruption is just something that involves money, but corruption is really just the betrayal of the public's trust. It is the accumulation of power at the expense of your constituents. And so I would also, as part of this package, ban partisan gerrymandering in every state in the union. I would overhaul the Supreme Court, because we've seen that billionaire mega donors can also buy Supreme Court justices just as easily as they can buy senators and congressmen. I would pass term limits so that people aren't making a career out of what's supposed to be a public service. And I would also, I included this idea in my agenda, which is legally, statutorily requiring that every member of Congress hold at least one annual town hall in their districts so that their constituents can hold them accountable. I do think that this is just the start, but I think these kinds of measures can start to build a government of, by, and for the people, instead of what we have now, which is a government of, by, and for the billionaires.
But in terms of getting those types of reforms
Yes.
through.
I forgot about your second question. Yeah. So, the reason I think we can actually get this done is because we have a people-powered campaign. I am not taking corporate PAC money in this race. I'm the only candidate in either party that's not taking corporate PAC money. We are funding this effort from 215,000 individual contributors who are giving $5, $10, $15 at a time. 98% of our donations are under $100. And we have donations from nearly every county across the state of Texas. So this is the kind of people-powered effort that you need if you're going to confront this broken political system. And I hope it can be a model for folks in other states to be able to use, because I do think that how we campaign, it informs how we fix this broken, corrupt system. And it's why I'm so focused on a people-powered grassroots movement.
Going back to this kind of the top-down, right-left divide discussion.
Yeah.
In some ways, I think there's an aspect of your discussion about that I'd like to kind of use to frame border and immigration. So, we've seen over the course of decades, groups of senators get together to try to pass some type of comprehensive immigration reform, and obviously it never takes, right? So, if you're elected, you'll be representing a border state. Can you give us a sense of the policies that you would support in a comprehensive plan? And so some of that would be obviously visas and so on, but some of it's security. So I'm kind of curious to see how you break that right-left divide on this topic as you talk about, what potentially could be comprehensive immigration.
Yeah, I think this is a great example of this dynamic, because as I travel this state, I've already held town halls and events in every corner of Texas. We've held events literally from Beaumont to El Paso, from Amarillo to Brownsville, and everywhere in between. I got a lot more places to visit, but I've already been to every region of our state in just the first 4 months of the campaign. And I can't tell you how many Republicans and independents are showing up at our events because they feel like the extremism and the corruption they've seen in their own party has not only hurt them and their communities, but is hurting the entire country. And I think immigration is one of those issues, because I talk to people on the left, I talk to people on the right. Everyone that I've talked to about this is in the same spot. We all want an immigration system that is pro-immigrant and pro-public safety. You can do both of those things. Those are not conflicting values. Those are not mutually exclusive values. The analogy that I've used is that we should treat our southern border like our front porch. There should be a giant welcome mat out front, and there should be a lock on the door, because we can welcome immigrants who want to come here and contribute and make this country richer and stronger. We can welcome the stranger, which is what I'm called to do in my religious tradition. And we can also keep out folks who mean to do us harm. And we can immediately deport any immigrant who commits a violent crime. again, these two things are not in tension with each other. And so that's, I think, what we can accomplish through comprehensive immigration reform, is building an immigration system that honors our legacy as a nation of immigrants. You wouldn't be interviewing a guy with the last name Talarico if this was not a nation of immigrants. And also have a system that keeps all of us safe, both native-born Americans and migrants and immigrants. And I'll also just say, I think both parties have failed us on this issue, and the failures of the Biden administration on our southern border is what opened the door to this extremism that we're currently seeing from the Trump administration.
Just sticking with immigration, or at least Homeland Security in this case. So when you look at the ICE raids that happened in different communities, and the killing of Renee Good, and the situation in Minneapolis, what oversight role does the Senate have in this? And well, I'll just leave it there. What's the oversight role, and what type of oversight would you support?
I've already said that the United States Senate, the U.S. Congress as a whole, must launch a full top-to-bottom investigation into ICE, into these abuses, not only in Minnesota, where a U.S. citizen was killed by her own government in broad daylight, but the abuses that we're seeing all across Texas of secret police, masked men in unmarked vehicles, kidnapping people off our streets without a warrant. I mean, this deserves response from our legislative branch. And the fact that we haven't seen any checks and balances over the past year, we have not seen the U.S. Congress hold this executive branch accountable, should disturb all of us. I've said that we have to pass a law banning ICE agents from wearing masks. We got to pass a law banning them from kidnapping people without a warrant, and we have to require them to identify themselves, which is the bare minimum of any law enforcement official. This is government overreach at its worst. This is the United States of America. We should not be afraid of our government. Our government should be afraid of us. And we're seeing the exact opposite right now.
Let me just step in here real quick. So I was just listening to your interview with Ezra Klein, and you were outlining your your perspective on your faith and how you live that out, how you understand the word faith. It was very interesting. And so I'm just kind of wondering how, so my dad's a Baptist pastor in China Spring, Texas, outside of Waco. Yeah. And so if you talk to my dad on a lot of issues, he almost sounds like a Democrat. He votes because of abortion, really. So how do you walk this line of speaking to people like my dad, who really, they see the harm of their own votes for generations, for a long time, but they vote on this one issue, and their faith is central to how they vote. My dad is pretty wary when he hears people say things like you said, like you see all faiths as paths to the same truth, stuff like that. So how do you speak to him, but then also to folks like me, who I don't follow my father's religion, and I'm pretty wary of hearing politics and religion spoken together like that. Like how do you walk that line?
Yeah, this is all very tricky, and I, throughout my 4 terms in the Texas legislature, have tried to model a healthy relationship between faith and politics. I speak very unapologetically about how my faith informs my public service. My granddad was a Baptist preacher, and the commandment to love my neighbor as myself is why I signed up to be a public school teacher, and why I decided to throw my hat in the ring to run for public office. And it's why I'm running for the U.S. Senate, is to love my neighbor through public policy, to make their lives easier and better, lowering the cost of housing, lowering the cost of childcare, lowering the cost of prescription drugs. This is all because of my faith. I've also, though, been the fiercest defender of the separation of church and state, of that sacred barrier enshrined in our First Amendment of our Constitution. And so I've fought back against Christian nationalism and attempts to force my religion down the throats of our Jewish, Muslim, Sikh, Buddhist, Hindu, agnostic, atheist neighbors. because we are called as Christians to love all our neighbors, regardless of their religion. And oftentimes, if you read the New Testament, so many of the heroes in Jesus's parables are members of other faiths. And so religious inclusivity, interfaith dialogue is something that's been part of our tradition since the ministry of Jesus of Nazareth. And I'm trying my best as a imperfect Christian to try to bring some of that inclusivity to the halls of the state capitol, and I want to bring it to the halls of the U.S. Senate. And then on the issue of abortion, this is I think a conversation that needs a lot more empathy and a lot more understanding, because if I think about Pope Francis or Pope Leo, these are spiritual heroes of mine, even though they were deeply and authentically and consistently pro-life. And normally I don't apply pro-life as a descriptor when I'm talking about my Republican colleagues in the Texas legislature, because they are not pro-life. They won't do anything about gun violence, the #1 cause of death for children in the United States. They are willing to kick children and moms off their health care, off food assistance, the second the baby is born. None of that to me is pro-life. All that is pro-forced birth. But there are people like Pope Leo, like your granddad, who are authentically and consistently pro-life. And for those members of our community, we must sit down and find some common ground. And I think the common ground is reducing the number of abortions in Texas. We can do that. We can, if we treat this like a public health issue rather than a political football, we can actually reduce the number of unwanted pregnancies and therefore the number of abortions. But under this extreme abortion ban, the most extreme in the country here in Texas, we have seen women dying in emergency room parking lots from sepsis because their doctors are too afraid to provide basic health care. We've seen maternal mortality spike in our state, particularly among Black women who are dying at disproportionate numbers during and after childbirth, all because of these extreme anti-life policies here in Texas. And so my goal, as always, this is how I've acted in the legislature. It's how I was able to win a Trump district. It's by finding what are our common values, what is that common ground, and then building from there. And I think that's what this issue of abortion needs now more than ever before.
Thank you.
I'm going to step in because you're talking about interfaith acceptance of different faiths, and one of the things that we're seeing happening right now is a big press, both particularly from Abbott and Paxton, but also from the federal government, to investigate people of the Muslim faith. We've seen it against CARE and up in North Texas. So is there now a lot of that's happening here in Texas, but is there a role for a new U.S. Senator in dealing with that issue in one way or the other? And if it is, what is it?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you really shouldn't believe anything a politician says. You should always look at what a politician has done, because I think past behavior is the best indicator of future behavior. And so I've had 8 years of doing a job very similar at the state level. And so I welcome you all to dig into the work that I've done. And on this question of interfaith cooperation, I think my record has been very clear. I've stood beside Muslims in Texas. I've stood beside Jewish Texans as they have faced hate in its many forms, whether it's Islamophobia, whether it's anti-Semitism. I have stood by our Hindu and Buddhist and Sikh neighbors. I've stood behind our atheist and agnostic neighbors, those who don't belong to any organized religion. And that, I think, is incumbent upon me as a Christian, as a member of the dominant religion in the United States, is to stand by my neighbors who belong to other traditions, because I think we need more of this conversation and dialogue across communities. We need more interfaith understanding and friendship. And I think that's what I can bring as U.S. Senator. And I think that's what most Texans want. They don't want to pick on our neighbors who have a different religious background. They want us to come together and work on the big things that impact all of us, whether you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, or an atheist. The cost of healthcare, the cost of housing, the cost of childcare, funding our public schools. These are the issues that I think we should be focused on, not religious discrimination.
Well, do you see that? Do you think that what's going on right now is scapegoating certain Muslim organizations? And if it is, if it's persecution versus prosecution, what ought to be done to rein that in?
I do think you're seeing persecution of a lot of different religious communities, but including Muslims in our state and around the country. And it's unacceptable. I believe it's unconstitutional. I will use every tool at my disposal, whether as a state representative or as a United States Senator, to protect all Texans regardless of their religious identity.
That's more of a politics kind of pragmatism question. The math in the Senate, of course, is really hard. The potential for Democrats to flip the Senate and even take control is an uphill climb, as you know. And then even if Democrats take control of that chamber, you have the filibuster, a lot of things you can't do without 60 votes. So realistically, as a senator, what do you see as the types of things that could get accomplished? Do you see some policy areas where you think you could really get to like the 60 votes? Do you see it more in terms of the subpoena powers and the other kinds of things that you can do from that pulpit?
Well, one, I support eliminating the current filibuster. I'm all for a talking filibuster. If a senator feels strongly enough to take to the floor and speak for an extended amount of time, I think that should be encouraged and celebrated, regardless of what party the senator comes from. But this current filibuster, where anyone can threaten a filibuster and kill any action from the majority, I think is undemocratic, small d democratic. I think the majority, whether it's the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, deserves the right to govern. I think that's central in our American system of government. We have majority rule with minority rights, and right now that balance is out of whack in the U.S. Senate. So I would be supportive of reforming the filibuster and eliminating it in its current form. But to answer your question, are there areas for bipartisan cooperation? Absolutely. And it's a lot of the policy areas that I worked on in the state house across the aisle. Y'all know that I couldn't get anything done in the state capitol without Republican support because of how Republicans dominate both chambers and the executive branch. So every bill that I've passed, and I've passed quite a few bills as a Democrat in the state legislature, and I did all of that by building coalitions across the partisan spectrum. So I passed the first ever cap on insulin copays. I passed a bill to import cheaper prescription drugs from Canada, two big healthcare accomplishments, and I did that by building support across the aisle. I think we could absolutely pursue some of these big healthcare topics at the federal level with bipartisan support, particularly around prescription drugs. I think childcare. I was able to pass two childcare bills in the legislature, major legislation that had been years in the making. I had to go desk by desk, personally getting Republican support to get those measures across the finish line. I think there is bipartisan support for universal childcare and early childhood education. This is not a Democrat or a Republican issue. Republicans understand the return on investment with early childhood education. And then last, I would say, is housing. And I was able to pass a big housing bill through the Texas Capitol this past legislative session. I think, again, this is not a partisan issue. There are a lot of Republicans who want to repeal outdated regulations that prevent us from building more housing. There are Republicans who want to see zoning reform. And so I'm going to work with them to get that done, because I think housing is one of the most pressing policy problems that face our country, that face young people in particular. And I want to make progress on it at the national level, just like I have at the state level.
You had you had some discussion about the filibuster reform. I'm just curious, is it ever appropriate to shut down the federal government?
I mean, that's always a decision that the majority makes. I think if the majority is asking for minority support for a measure, they have to strike a compromise. and the minority shouldn't give their votes to the majority without some kind of concession. So, this is something that we saw just recently in DC when the federal government shut down at the end of last year. And I think it was completely appropriate for Democrats to demand concessions in exchange for their support on the floor. And if the majority is not willing to do that and therefore shuts down the government, then that's their decision.
Was it appropriate for Ted Cruz to shut down the government?
And remind me when Ted Cruz shut down the government, was this?
Was it what,
2013? 2013.
2013.
I have to go back. I was in the classroom when I was back in 2013, but I have to go back and see what Ted Cruz did. But
I guess my question really is it appropriate? If it's appropriate for one party, is it appropriate for another? Is there,
and that's why I tried to.
Does the shutdown actually serve the good of the American people?
It depends on
I'm not sure what Democrats got out of the last shutdown, to be honest. So we don't have ACA subsidies, and a bunch of people didn't get SNAP. At least it was delayed.
Yeah, I think it depends on, if you're asking, like, is it constitutionally, is it allowed? Is it morally acceptable? I think it really depends on the circumstances in each case.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand if you're in the Senate, I'm just trying to understand where you would fall in that kind of like, from a governance perspective. Is it in the interest of the American people to have the federal government shut down? Does it actually serve people?
That's a much easier question to answer. As U.S. Senator, I will go to the mat for Texans when it comes to protecting their health care, protecting the basics that they need to be able to support themselves and their families. And if the majority is trying to strip away those benefits, then I will do everything and use every tool in my toolbox, including withholding my vote to be able to keep those benefits in place.
I'm curious. You mentioned, James, a couple of your spiritual heroes, and if you could elaborate on that. But I'd also be interested in who are some of your political heroes or heroines who brought you to the politics where you are now.
Yeah, great question. I mentioned our two most recent popes as heroes of mine, but I've also taken inspiration from people of other faith traditions like Thich Nhat Hanh, like Mahatma Gandhi, have been inspired by Dr. King and Howard Thurman and Fannie Lou Hamer in the American Civil Rights Movement, and I've also been inspired by Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez and the farm workers, inspired by a lot of labor leaders, Dorothy Day, a labor organizer and a Catholic theologian. All these leaders have really inspired me in my spiritual journey and in my political work. And then in terms of politicians, I think of a lot of the members that I served with that I look up to. Symphonia Thompson, the Dean of the House. I probably learned more from Miss T than I learned from any other one of my colleagues about how to effectively fight for people and deliver for people. I think about my first campaign I ever worked on when I was in high school for my state representative, Mark Strama, who represented HD 50, which is now the district that I hold in the Texas House. I signed up to help his campaign when I was a junior in high school. I think it was actually right between my junior and senior year. And that was what first, got me interested in public service and in politics and government. And so I owe a lot to him and still try to model my leadership off of what he taught me. So those are some of I'm sure I'm leaving lots of people off, but those are some of the people that first come to mind.
If I can kind of just change gears here a little bit, I want to go back to, you talked about holding ICE accountable in Minneapolis. But kind of broadening that scope of accountability, what do you see as the best path forward in terms of the administration once you're in office? Is it simply impeding the Trump administration's agenda? Is it pushing for impeachment? Is that something you would support, or is it pushing for something stronger like criminal charges? What do you see as like the roadmap for kind of stopping some of these actions, including stuff like what's going on with Greenland?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think about this in the same way I think about the question of government shutdown. It's less, to me, abstract, like, is this thing always good or always bad? To me, it is what is best for Texans in any given situation, any given fight. I have an employer that I have to answer to. My employer is the people of Texas. That's my boss. And so I have to serve them. And that may look differently in different fights. If it's trying to protect their health care, if it's trying to ensure that we don't have Texans being kidnapped off of our streets, that's where my focus is going to be. And I'm going to use every tool in my toolbox to be their champion in the United States Senate. That's the job I'm applying for currently. And once elected, that's the job I'll have. And so when it comes to holding the administration accountable, I mean, that I think is the role of the U.S. Congress, is to check the executive branch and any of their overreach, any of their abuses of power. It certainly seems like there have been abuses of power in the current administration, and I think those need to be held accountable. At the same time, if the administration is doing something good for Texans, then I think that needs to be celebrated, and I think we need to find common ground to again serve our state. So to me, it's not a question of blanket, will I always go after the Trump administration, or will I work with the administration? To me, depends on what they're doing. If they're doing something productive and helpful, then I'm happy to work with anyone and everyone, just like I did in the state capitol. If they're doing something harmful, then I'm going to stand up to them and use every fiber of my being to fight for Texans. Again, just like I did in the State House. To me, there's all kinds of binary thinking in our politics. But one of the worst is like, are you a fighter or do you work across the aisle to get stuff done? In my experience, you can absolutely do both. You can and should and must do both. If you're going to be an effective leader, if you're going to be an effective legislator at the state level or the national level, you have to be able to know how to fight back and how to get things done at the same time. And Texans shouldn't settle for less than that.
Some of the polls have showed that you've got a lead against your opponents. And I just want to know, what do you think has resonated with the constituents so far? And how do you ride that momentum until not just the primary, but to the fall?
Well, I think the reason we've seen so many people showing up at these events, we've seen, more than 13,000 people sign up to volunteer for the campaign. We've shattered grassroots fundraising records. I think all of that energy and excitement is because this is a campaign to take on the system itself. There's a lot of personalities in politics. There's a lot of temptation to focus on one politician or one political party, but there aren't many campaigns or candidates out there talking about how do we take on the system itself. I mean, if I'm thinking about why politics sucks right now, I think about who was sitting right behind the president at the inauguration. I think about who runs the 24-hour corporate media that treats news as entertainment. I think about who owns the social media algorithms that keep us angry and divided. A handful of billionaires have redesigned our politics for their own profit, right? The us versus them, the trolling, the owning, the name calling, the winning at all costs. I mean, it's politics has become professional wrestling. And we all keep scrolling, we all keep watching, we all keep fighting, and they keep getting richer off the whole thing. I mean, they have literally transformed how we talk to each other, how we learn about the world. I mean, it's why you and your MAGA uncle, who you used to get along with just fine, why you now both live in completely different realities. And so I don't think politics should feel this way. I've said before that politics is just another word for how we treat our neighbors, and we should treat each other a lot better than this. So I do think we can take on this broken system and chart a new kind of politics that's not rooted in division, not rooted in fear and hate, but something that's rooted in hope and in service and in love. And I think that's what our campaign's trying to do, and why we're seeing the response from people.
Let's say you do get elected. What are the first, 2 or 3 things, or even just one thing that you think is your first priority?
Well, I've talked about 3 big structural costs in the economy: healthcare, childcare, and housing. Those are 3 things that I've made a lot of progress on at the state level. 3 things I want to work on at the federal level. But I would just say I really don't believe we're going to make progress on those 3 issues or any other important issues until we pass comprehensive political reform. So I know that sounds wonky. I know it sounds like inside baseball, but I really do think the system itself has to be transformed before we can actually start doing the people's business in all of these policy areas. Because right now the system doesn't work for regular people. It's not designed to work for regular people. It's designed to work for those that are wealthy and those that are well connected. So that system itself has to be righted. It has to be reclaimed by people again. And so that's why I would prioritize that anti-corruption agenda that I laid out earlier as the first priority.
What you said, if the administration is doing something that's good for Texans, you're up in for participating. What do you think are some of those things, if any?
Yeah, well, I mean, we talked about the extremism from the administration on immigration, the secret police, the disappearing people, maybe some of the most alarming things the administration has done. So it's a little ironic that I think where we can give the administration credit is on border policy, not on immigration policy, but on border policy, because we have seen the chaos at our southern border reined in. I speak to my border colleagues often. Many of them are supporting me in this campaign, and I do think that the administration has made some progress on border security, and we should give credit where credit is due. But I am disturbed, to say the least, at their domestic immigration policy on how they have treated our undocumented neighbors, how they've terrorized communities, and I think it has to end.
Well, I mean, let me just kind of dissect that a little bit, because aren't some of the practices in the interior that you're very concerned about, aren't some of those practices, isn't that playing a role in why the U.S.-Mexico border is so quiet? Like yes, it's under control, particularly compared to the Biden administration, but hasn't this climate of fear contributed to people voluntarily deporting or simply not presenting for asylum?
No, because I think we saw this progress in border security before the president got elected. His administration has built on that, but the current administration late in 2024 decided to seal the southern border, and we saw border crossings drop significantly after that action was taken. So to me, that means that there are border security measures you can pursue that don't involve terrorizing communities in the United States. I think that is, that may be an argument the administration wants to make, that fear is somehow a policy tool to reduce chaos at the border. But I don't think that the evidence supports that, and I think it's a justification for an internal domestic policy that they have wanted to pursue for a long time.
So for Democratic primary voters who are looking at you and your main opponent in the race, and certainly there's a lot of similarities policy-wise in terms of where you're at, how should they decide to vote for you as opposed to your opponent? What do you see as the key distinction that they should draw between the two?
Well, I think I bring something unique to this race, which is my track record of delivering for people in the state house. The number of bills that I've passed to actually get stuff done, but also the times that I've been able to defeat harmful Republican bills. I last session single-handedly defeated 6 Republican bills that would have kicked people off their Medicaid and food assistance, would have banned even more books in libraries across the state, would have allowed Republican officials to run local elections. I identified and wrote and argued points of order to single-handedly stop those bills. I have also, as y'all know, been able to use the bully pulpit of my office to be able to shed light on harmful bills and shame the Republican majority into stopping those bills. I think about the Furries Act that Greg Abbott and his colleagues were trying to push through the Texas House, and I was able to shine a statewide spotlight on just how ridiculous that bill was, and then all of a sudden it didn't make it out of committee. I also led the quorum break over the summer, as y'all know, to shine a national spotlight on Trump's redistricting power grab, which I think played a big role in motivating other states to get involved in this fight. Again, I hope we can pass a national ban to end this practice of gerrymandering everywhere. But when there is an abuse, when there's a bully, you have to stand up to that bully, and you got to look him in the eye. And that's what we did with our quorum break, and what we did with the national response to that power grab. So that track record of both fighting back against Republican extremism and being able to work across the aisle to still get stuff done, that's a balance that I think I bring to this race. The last is the ability to win tough races, because nothing else matters unless we win this seat. In a democracy, winning is what matters. If you don't win, you can't help people. I have seen the consequences up close in the trenches of the Texas House of losing elections. I have seen people get hurt. I've seen people's rights get rolled back, all because we have failed to win at the ballot box. And so I've won tough races like this. I've flipped seats like this before, and albeit that was at a smaller scale, but I do believe that I have the skill set to cobble together a large coalition of fired up, inspired Democrats, new voters who maybe have been disillusioned with the process before, and some moderates and independents and Republicans who want to join this coalition. I've shown that I can piece that together. And I think that track record of winning tough races and flipping seats it should be a big part of this decision on who we pick to be our Democratic nominee. And I say all that while respecting Congresswoman Crockett immensely. She and I served together. I consider her a friend. We're both going to make our pitches for why we think we're best to win. But that is the question. It's the question that should be on everyone's mind when they go vote in this Democratic primary, is who can best win this race in November, because nothing else matters.
I'm curious, you talked about gerrymandering, I think, on points in our interview. Would you say that gerrymandering has led to this primary race with Representative Crockett?
In what way?
Well, and her district was redrawn, right? And now she's in this, now she's running for U.S. Senate. So perhaps in a different reality where that district remains. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts of, do you view the gerrymandering process as influencing this primary right now? Maybe you don't, and that's fine, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't know enough about exactly what Congresswoman Crockett's why she made the decision she made. I know she was looking at 2 different congressional races, districts in DFW, and made the decision to run for this seat. So I don't know the role that gerrymandering played in that decision. That probably be a better question for her.
Okay. Other questions? I think we're all done then.